Well, the traffic in New York is why am I wearing sunglasses? Traffic. Thank you, Karen.
Why don't you maybe finish the thought about 35 and then we'll circle back to the Natasha, we had a great screen, the print looked amazing. I was in the room and we were just catching up. So maybe what I'll do is kind of circle back to some of the earlier questions, which was really about how you all started working together. And the fact that Asa wrote this film in part for you for those 3 fantastic.
I just want to point out that Carrie's outfit is no less insane.
The shoulder girl.
Very cool. Sorry, ma'am. Are you wearing some sort of a velvet?
I have some business in the park.
I see.
I'm a flasher. Yes, I'm a flasher.
A fancy Columbo. The Gilded Age meets Columbo. Miss Simone Rochon. Yes. Oh, it looks it. Wow, I know what she needs. I'm so sorry. I see you guys have begun something far more sane.
We have secrets, we have velvet. I tried some leather. I'm trying. I'm trying.
Yeah.
35 millimeter.
Oh God, I love film. There's just something about like the print, you know what I mean? Sorry.
Natasha,
Yes, dear.
tell us at the beginning when I got you the script.
Oh, that question, that old gem. Yeah, it's crazy that Trump is the president, huh? I mean, that question hits different. So back then, it was not Trump's America. And yes, we got the script. Very exciting. I think that what was mostly so thrilling was the idea of the 3 of us wanting to work with each other as much as we did. And that you could see it all. Oz is a very humble genius. He's also our last analog filmmaker. He really saw it all. And I guess what was exciting about it is that we all felt the same way about each other. And it was one of those things that was like, you know, beyond my wildest imaginations of what it could be, what I thought that meant to my, I don't know, my soul or something. It's far surpassed that, it transcends it.
In the kind of mix of, let's say, grief and grievance, you know, communication, isolation, I mean, between Katie and Rachel, there's so much play of kind of language and silence, and I wonder if you could, we're speaking a bit about like the musicality of the film, I'm wondering if you could each speak to that, like the, you know, the showing up to learn how to listen to each other as siblings, and like what that means for a performance, right? That's going to be sometimes more about silences or, you know, really kind of active in this kind of almost like vocal performance. I'd love to just like dive in a bit into the rhythm of working together.
Found the snap, see? And which makes so much more sense because then the boobs won't go fly. I was sort of like, aren't I 45? Why let them fly? I'm French, right? Is there a question?
Yes.
Where's the kid?
All of it.
Yeah, well, you know, metronome.
I could say things that you're asking about. Like, there's this thing that the father says about you don't know how similar the two of you are, and he also says, you know, how sad that Rachel is when Katie left home. And that is definitely something that I tried to think of in terms of, like, yes, they've had very, very different lives, but in terms of like what happens after this film, I have this fantasy that the two of them have a different understanding of each other. And I do see Christina as the one that escapes, and that's part of her survival. But I do see this idea of them recognizing something in each other. The idea that, you know, I don't know how much this comes across, but that the Audrey Hepburn poster, that she's wearing the same sunglasses as Katie, that it's always there, that there's some part of Katie that Rachel is idolizing. And that there's, I imagine those fights that happen between them, and I also imagine that the similarities in terms of their paths as teenagers, and that being challenging because they were both a certain age when they lost their mothers, that they could understand in a different way that Christina could. And then, you know, so they're inverses of each other in a certain way. There's at the very end, you know, Rachel sitting outside, and it's kind of directly linked to what Katie says to her, like, when you sit outside, think of me, do that out of respect rather than your father, so that there's like this symbiotic, you know, relationship between the two of them, and that I was using not only their rhythm, but like, yes, I was constantly, whenever things would especially start going a little bit off the ground in different directions when we're shooting, I could go back and play this metronome sound that Natasha's talking about, to kind of just remind us that there's a father, that there's a person that's there breathing, that's present at that moment, that's kind of in some way hearing everybody. And ultimately, he is hearing everybody, even in his fantasy speech at the end.
I mean, it's super goth, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe the most goth soundtrack ever. Because it really, the piece is written to the tempo of death.
Yeah, and not only that, the you know, the score, the whole thing, the score is based on that tempo. Like, that's the one thing that I was able to pass on to Rodrigo Morante, was talking about, like, I could pass him that tempo that I was going to go for, ultimately the heartbeat, and that's where all the notes are coming off of, besides the song itself at the very end. You know, it was this hard, I mean, I hope that, I wanted this film to be much more about living and being alive and being the joy of even the struggle of life more than anything, rather than a film about passing so much.
What confronting death can teach us about living? I mean, that's so much what I got out of it. But one thing that you touched on earlier that I wanted to go back to is the apartment itself, and in a way, like, being so rooted in New York City, almost also like in cinema about New York City. I mean, it really feels like a lot of references there. But how you're working with the space in teasing out these relationships, literally when the sisters are sharing space or not. Can you talk about finding that space and working with it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so I wrote for these actors, and I wrote for a certain type of apartment that I grew up going to. I didn't grow up in a home like that, but I went to a lot of friends growing up here in the city. And so I was chasing a certain type of apartment that had, sometimes you walk into places and you can feel history, the history of the family, you can feel the history of the generations before in the walls, and you can feel the fights and the different occasions that have happened. And so my wife, Diaz, who's the producer and also the costumer, who's here, who's next to the cinematographer, Sam Levy. You know, so we were chasing this kind of feeling more than anything, and I was able to, it made me reach out to a lot of kids I grew up with that led me down this path to find this housing complex on Grand Street. That one place opened up, they sent out an email to 900 units, so I was able to go through many people opened up their homes. And this particular place, yeah, I walked in, it's a young couple that lived there, it was all kind of modernized and sparse and, you know, painted and everything. everything else, but there was like this amazing, weird wall that spoke to me. It was built so well, so strong, it felt so thick. It felt so understanding of what it's like to have a family pact with each other. It felt like it was trying to give each other space. It was considerate of light in a way. There was a history to it that I really wanted in this film. And so working with Diaz and working with Sam and working with Kendall Anderson, who's the producer, production designer, like we were able to just think about giving it a sense of history and giving the audience a sense of history with each frame, because we knew that we're isolating actors in a certain way that you'd be able to pick up backstories if there's plants over there or if there's a certain type of pillow or whatever it was. So it was a total reworking of everything in there, but it was reworking it to give it a sense of past in the way that we could feel absence in the way that they talk about it, in the way that we were kind of explaining with the father.
And it really created, because we were spending 12 hours a day in there, and it was so, the space was so alive, and it felt like it had so much history because of the job Kendall had done on it. And also because it was so small, you understood how you would overhear a phone conversation or hear your sister singing in the other room. But the other thing that got created was that anybody who came into the space felt jarring, like an interloper. So Jasmine or Angel, anybody who was coming into that rhythm, because we were spending all of our time there getting to know each other, it really did feel a little bit like an intrusion. And yet, when J.O. came out, he came in, for 2 days to do his work on the movie. He plays Vincent. It felt like he'd been in the room the whole time. And so it didn't ever feel like, he didn't feel like an intruder. We had a sense of J.O. having been there with us. And so it created the same dynamics because we were stuck just on the couch playing spelling bee all day. And that wall, that's my favorite scene. And my favorite scene is when Natasha brings Lizzie tea when Lizzie's trying to take a break. I love that scene. And it exists really because that stupid wall is there.
And I would say the other thing was just like working with, like embracing that we couldn't control light. Like, we talk about the theatrical and like, oh, could this exist on a stage? For me, the idea of like this without New York City permeating it, and how like we'd be on a shot with, with Carrie looking out the window and how the light changes, and that these were things that we just had to let go to New York City, and the sounds below, all these things were essential for me. Like, if anything, this film came out of my love for this place.
It really does resonate that way, and it's a way, like, kind of a question of how to like live a full life here, like a whole life here, and it needs to be rooted. So I really appreciate that. I'd love to talk a little bit more about the final scene, now that you just kind of brought it up. Like, was that always like, to me, that to your point, like what cinema can do, the kind of magic of cinema, is that you can introduce this resolution or this encounter, like that we wish that we would have in our lives. Like, was that always how you envisioned ending the film?
Well, again, like writing it forward, I think I had a rule in my mind that I was going to not see the father. I wasn't going to go into the father's room. It was definitely a surprise writing when the father came out. It worried me. It felt like I was breaking something like very neat that I set up, but that's exciting to me. Certain things that they, certain structures that are pretty arbitrary in the end of the day. And then ultimately I wound up really wanting to hear what the father had to say, and then needing to hear what the father said. And then it ultimately, like, it spoke to something deeply what Christina said about talking about the fantasy. It allowed me to acknowledge something that I had a lot of the reason I didn't want to go into the father's room was because I just didn't want to do the kind of this fake dying scene. And this was a way for me to embrace it and also talk about what it means to the absence that she talks about. So suddenly there's an empty chair. And these little stories, it's hard for me, like that monologue, I'm thinking a lot about it right now, just because my father's a filmmaker, and he grew up here in the city, and he had a terrible father, and high school gave him a pass to MoMA, and so the way to escape home would be to come over here. And at some point he went down here and realized that they were showing movies, and it completely changed his life, right? Like this showed him something else was possible. And so the father talks about his father being related, but just, you know, that they related by blood, but there's no father, and that's me taking directly from things that my dad said. And then my dad was in the Coast Guard and got snowed out in Alaska. So there's like this weird thing where I'm acknowledging someone's life, but the story about Bliss is mine. It's a weird mix of things that I felt like not only did I need to hear, but I also truly needed to say. And I went with it, you know, not knowing, I know it's gonna be for some people and some people it's not gonna be for other people, but it was so necessary for me that all I could do was try to make it as precise as possible.
And it sounds like when you got to the end of the shooting, you also, as kind of, you know, siblings and actors, you were ready for that moment too, right? To join you. I think we're being cute to wrap up the Q&A soon. So I wanted to ask maybe for to hear more about maybe memories from what I can see is a very memorable shoot and process. Anything that you would want to share?
What is it, Eternal Sunshine? Yeah, they took all our memories when we left.
That's a never new system. I didn't know that.
But, you know, that's what Sam and Ozzy wanted. Shoot on film, they called it. I guess, I just really think of us, limbs akimbo, spelling bee. And I think that the real magic of the thing was, I think secretly we kind of knew we were up to something special. But it's that thing, you know, like those rules of, I don't know, like during a take, if you're directing, you never tell the other actor, you know. Hey, here's what I like about what you're doing. You never do that. That's like acting, directing 101. Never fuck with somebody sort of, you know, the arts are like cats. This metaphor gets worse as it goes. But, you know, I think you just kind of like, you don't poke the bear. And so we never did that thing. I think it's really Carrie Coon's fault because she's such a serious motherfucker. So we all sort of tried to join in there, but we don't do things like that. Like say, hey, I think this might be a pretty good movie. We you know, opted not to. Instead, we just sort of stayed focused. And what that looked like in practical application was us kind of on top of each other and playing the spelling bee, you know, yelling out, I got queen bee, oh fuck, genius, no, it's not enough, you need queen bee. But I think that, you know, underneath all that, really what was happening is we were saying to each other, like, psst, I could be making something special, don't tell anyone, because I'm gonna jinx it. And that felt like very sacred ground. And as with like Diaz and Sam were doing too, I think we were sort of, you know, because you don't want to bet on your own horse, you know what I mean? Groucho Marx taught us that, right? Don't join that club, don't be remember. Woody Allen, is he still popular? So, yeah, just checking in on New York. Grew up here, born and raised in Manhattan. So yeah, just to say, I think that was sort of my biggest memory is like that little nugget, that feeling of what it's like when you know you're up to something so special that it's a secret, and you guys all hold it together, and you don't jinx it. Don't spook the cat. Any other questions?
That seems like a perfect place to end. Thank you so much.